From I Am Interchange, it's the Hatch podcast series. Hey friends, Tate here with fantastic news. Our podcast is a finalist in the Signal Awards for the Sustainability and Environmental category. Our Brazil series, covering the G20 Summit with Limelight and the X Prize Rainforest Initiative, made the top 6, and we're now in the voting round. If you have a moment, could you please vote for us? You can cast your vote here at iaminterchange.com. That's iaminterchange.com. Thank you so much for your support. Enjoy the show. Here's the thing about leaving. Sometimes you plan for it for years. A better job, an education, a shot at something bigger than where you came from. Other times it happens fast. Governments fall, food disappears, you run. This is the story of human migration and displacement, one of the oldest patterns in our species. Moving for survival, moving for hope, moving because staying is no longer possible. And then there's that moment, the door closing, the airport gate, the bus pulling away. You're stepping out of your own life, betting the unknown will be better than what you left behind. Culture, friends, family, everything. Gone in an instant. It's trauma. It's hope. It's a blank page. And for the people who make it, there's something else. The unspoken. The emotions you can't name. The conflicted feelings you can't say out loud. So, how do you survive that? How do you build a new life without the scaffolding of community? How do you become part of something new without feeling like a burden? I'm Tate Chamberlin, and in today's episode, we're sitting with 3 people who have thought about this and experienced this deeply. Zohra Zori, Petroucheva, and Angela Eifert. They're going to talk with me about displacement, belonging, and the slow learning curve of new cultures. And we're going to look at all of it, the mistakes, the forgiveness, the othering that happens when you're new, the way refugee camps stretch on for years, sustained by endless aid, the difference between sustainability and dependence. This is a space for vulnerability, for beginning again, for understanding sovereignty, even when choice has been stripped away. Because right now, a lot of the world is in motion. Families uprooted, cultures colliding, dreams carried across borders. Even in movement, even in loss, we hold on to the hope of a better life. This is Dispatch from the Heartland. Join us, won't you? Topics around human migration and displacement, and hoping to open it up just by exploring why people migrate.
I think people migrate to find a better life, to reach their dreams. Yeah, I think it's a natural part of our humanity to go toward our dreams, our goals.
I think that's definitely a part of it. I would like more people to be migrating for that reason, but there's a lot of folks that migrate
to run
by
from
by sheer circumstance, conflict, social or economic exclusion, climate, which is growing. So there's a number of things. I think, there's definitely that opportunistic lens, but there are far more people that are leaving places they call home, places where they're grounded in culture and familiarity, and shared understandings. They're more so forced. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm thinking in the case of my parents, they are looking for something different, something greater, something more fair, secure, safe, where their hard work will actually yield something more reliably. But that means in their case, they definitely are running from something too, which is an environment that won't allow for that.
Yeah.
So started with people trying to find a better life and more opportunities, and then it opened up to people being forced to migrate due to economic or violence or other circumstances.
Yeah, and I think there is something, for some people, like a crazy streak in them that's just it's a little irresponsible. In some cases, it's a little irresponsible, and they're doing it. They don't know what's on the other side. They're taking a bet. They're taking a bet that leaving their current home, their culture, their history, all of that, their friendships, their work, that it'll pay off.
If they migrate to their destination.
Yeah.
In my travels, I've come across a lot of people. I've traveled to like more than 60 countries. I've come across people in some of these countries that have, you can tell they've lived in America based on the American slang that they're using or something else. And as you engage in conversation with them, it's, wait, have you lived in America? They're like, yeah, I was there for such and such in this period of time. And I came back because I just went, for example, to America to make money, to make a living, to start something. But my home is my home. And those are people that I think are very fortunate where they have the decision to migrate for economic reasons, for educational reasons, whatever it might be, and go back. And then there are others that are absolutely looking for a new beginning or have no choice but to find new beginnings.
Yeah, and I'd like to just add dreams. No matter what happens, we still have our dreams. And I do think that it motivates us to go from here to there in pursuit of that dream that will stay with us. Yeah, I just believe in dreams. I believe people hold on to them.
I want to back up a little bit to your family's relationship to migration or displacement. And then we'll dig deeper on the other stuff.
Yeah. So my family's relationship with immigration. 2 brothers, mom, dad, myself. We lived in Kabul, Afghanistan during the Soviet War. There's a lot of details in between. Long story short, because of the war and many other factors, we escaped. So we walked from Afghanistan to Pakistan. We were very fortunate to only be there for 5 months. Whereas I think, as most listeners might know, like that country of mine has been under so much conflict for the last 40 years. A lot of the neighboring countries have been receptive, sometimes begrudgingly, sometimes with welcomed arms. When people migrate to some of the neighboring countries, you don't know if it's something that's temporary or if it's permanent, whether you will be forced to go back to what you were trying to run from, or if you'll be welcomed and that's the place that you're settling, or if you will be moving on to another journey. So for my family, my parents absolutely had aspirations and dreams, but they also had built really good lives in Afghanistan. Like my father was a general in the military. My mom, as a woman in that era, was the president of all pharmacies in the country of Afghanistan. They literally dropped everything. And we walked for 12 days over the mountains through the valleys to Pakistan. And we applied to every embassy that we could think of. German, Canadian, Australian, US, and some other consulate office, I can't remember. And we were actually quite successful within 5 months of finding political asylum and moving to Jacksonville, Florida. And then that's where kind of my American journey began. But it's not like my parents were like, I can't wait to go and restart my life. They were like, what do we do to save the lives of our kids and provide new opportunity for them? And there's so much to unpack in terms of the new beginnings here. But that's my family's relationship.
Yeah, and my parents both grew up in communist Bulgaria. They, like many Bulgarians who lived through that time, they have some sort of conflicted feelings about what it was like to live there, but then and live in that system. So after communism fell, Bulgaria was overrun with so much corruption and such a void, and people not knowing what sense to make of the system, theft and all of these things that just made it unfeasible to live there comfortably and have good odds that if you work hard, you'll get a secure lifestyle. So that's what led them out.
I am pulling off of a lot of experience in understanding my family's connection to immigration. We've lived our whole lives in the U.S. I'm a 3rd generation person living in the U.S. in Wisconsin is where we settled, my family, and we came from Ireland and Germany, and I don't know much about that journey, to be honest. We never talked about it as a kid. There was a lot of pride to be in the U.S., but I never really understood how much that meant to my ancestors who actually took that journey firsthand. And I wish I had. I wish I had that opportunity and wish I knew what to ask when I was a kid. That wasn't even something in my mind about it. But my grandmother and I did have a really blessed moment together when I was a kid, and I was doing a school interview with her. And it was the one kind of moment that I had to even ask questions about her life. And she did share with me that her parents really struggled to come here from Ireland, and it was because of starvation. They were really struggling in Ireland to live. And so they were in pursuit of a better life for their family and were really determined to pick themselves up and make life happen and start anew. But it was something they didn't talk about. It was something like they made it. I get the feeling that they had a lot of feelings that they could not express about it. So it was really hard for my grandmother to even share because I don't think they shared with her. So that's how the relationship we have is a real disconnected, but emotional. But it's all inside, not outside. Yeah. A lot of hard work went into that, but not a lot of spoken emotion.
Yeah, it strikes me that in some cases, things are moving so quickly. So there's not a lot of time to pause and reflect and express to the kids and express maybe even to each other, my parents, about what's going on and how they're feeling and how they're processing. Or just, they blink and 10 years have gone by.
Exactly.
I also think it speaks to a generational mindset of we are very fortunate to be living in a moment. And I think the generation that comes after us is experiencing it even more, where like self-expression and having different vehicles and channels for sharing stories and documenting stories exists in our lifetime. There's cameras, there's video cameras, there's podcasts, there's your cell phones, you can record stuff. And I think maybe even if they wanted to, I wonder if it was just a cultural thing where the whole world was in movement when I think about like my grandparents' generation. And then also when my parents were migrating too, is like just this mindset of like just accepting that's your destiny and you move on. And you don't talk about it. So sometimes when I hear, I'm sure we've all heard it, like that everybody uses this analogy, like, oh, somebody gives me this example of when I was your age, we walked uphill bare feet. That there's something there. You probably did. Can you pause and share that story? Because it exists, but they don't talk about it.
Yeah. And I think there is a lot of unprocessed emotion.
Yes.
Generationally that was handed down. So there's really a disconnect with what that really was for them.
Yeah.
And
it was not okay to process. There wasn't,
Yeah.
There was not an acceptance of making that space to accept your emotions, to talk about them.
And I think the trauma was there, the trauma of leaving it all behind, even if it was in pursuit of something better.
You're all here now at Hatch because of like projects that you have done or you're currently working on. I'm curious about those.
So my work generally involves coming in when a community is experiencing usually some conflict between political lines and needs some help figuring out a process for getting people together, again, usually who think differently, to co-imagine a future together. It's a lot of what we do at the Kansas Leadership Center.
That's amazing. We should look at ways to partner.
Happy to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll jump in on Alight's work with Hatch is connecting amazing people to rally behind the mission of Alight, really to help find more people, find others to join us in this work of what does it mean to be an immigrant in the U.S.? How can we make that more welcoming? We need more Americans with that kind of future, better future in mind, who are really dedicated to making a better future in America and in the world, to join us and invite others who will walk that journey with us and for immigrants, with and for immigrants and refugees who come to the U.S. to make it more welcoming. And so our work specifically right now is geared toward private sponsor groups and finding more Americans who will raise their hand and say yes to being a mentor and community support, community sponsor group. Basically, mentor community that's willing to really navigate with and provide mentor support to new arrivals. And that work is really meaningful to us because we've been doing this work for 45 years globally, and we really do care deeply about that journey and meeting people where they are. And so we're really proud to be the Intersect in the U.S. to make that experience more welcoming and to join Hatch, the community of people, the amazing humans of Hatch, to do that work with.
To build on what Angela has shared as well, Alight, formerly known as the American Refugee Committee, has been around for 45 years. We've always worked internationally, and just in the last 2 years, what's really compelled us to launch a program that's dedicated to welcoming newcomers in the United States was instigated by what we saw happening in Afghanistan 2 years ago with the Taliban takeover and influx of displaced folks into the United States, and also what unfortunately has been happening in Ukraine and the influx of folks who are looking for new beginnings. What's really interesting also, as myself who's gone through the displacement journey a couple of times too, is what I love about what we're doing and also what we're learning from partners and innovators like those that are here at Hatch is that resettling and having a new beginning isn't just about fulfilling your basic needs. It's really about thinking about how to launch dignified new beginnings. You and I were speaking earlier today, Lucy, about how your parents, after having been in the United States for well over 20-something years, still don't have friends, anyone. So I think like the kind of work that our organization does is what are those essential human experiences that anybody in the world needs to have in order to live a life of dignity and abundance? And what role can we play to broker a relationship with those that are looking for those new beginnings and the host communities, essentially those in the United States that are welcoming them in? So we're on that journey to help build on those essential human experiences, whether it's like psychosocial support, the safety of house and home, the integration of culture, for example, something that we talked about in another group as well, too. And like, how do you create ways for folks to not feel alone in the process and build the skills that they need to have meaningful lives? So I think the work is deep and it's rich. And I have really enjoyed our explorations here at Hatch on how we can make that work better.
Yeah, Lucy, I was also taken back by the comment about your parents. And I'm just curious, when you go through this process, what are some of the ways that you've helped make community? And what's advice that you would have to your parents if they ever asked you?
Ooh, I've given them lots of unsolicited advice. They would never, they've not asked, but yeah, just go to church, go volunteer, get more involved at work. I know there's a lot of seductive things about being a remote employee, and it can be really helpful to actually go into work every once in a while and experience that culture more. Maybe also just having a little bit more trust that, yes, it's a little awkward when someone doesn't understand you or has to ask a few times and get used to your accent, but that's worth it. It's just so necessary. And even if 10 of those people and 10 of those connections don't end up working, the one that does is worthwhile.
So maybe they have tried, but it maybe has not led them anywhere, but maybe there were all the times where it didn't work, where maybe one more would have?
Maybe. I don't know. If I can't speak to how much they've tried. From what I've seen, they've been really hesitant to try. And there's an assumption that culturally they're just so different from Americans that gap can't really be bridged. And as we were talking about doing the work of cultural assimilation, how do you do that authentically? Yeah, we can give my parents a training on American culture norms. What they really need are people who can be around them. And when they inevitably step on their toes, they can say, that right there, not cool in America. They need that. It's more uncomfortable. Part of what I've been thinking about all day is that we just need to get more comfortable stepping on each other's toes. Just understand that is the work of cultural assimilation. It's going to be weird. It's going to be awkward. It's going to be offensive at times. This is what we have to navigate. This is the work of it. There's no way around it.
Yeah, I love that. And I will add to that. I think what can make stepping on each other's toes more comfortable is for the people whose toes are being stepped on to see each other as equals. So I think there definitely needs to be a narrative shift. There's a lot of othering that happens. I'm going to focus on the space that I'm working in right now. For example, we refer to those that have been displaced as displaced individuals, not refugees, because refugees speaks more to a label that people don't want to wear. And it's also more othering language. So I think it would, like my parents, and Tate, you didn't ask me the question of what advice I would give to my parents. I also have given lots of unsolicited advice, but I would say that they are just so grateful to be in this country with new opportunities that the last thing they want to do is be a burden, because you are immigrants that this amazing country, and America, I do believe, is one of the best countries in the entire world. But it's also, we don't want to be a burden, so we're not going to ask for things.
Exactly.
We're just going to keep a low profile and work really hard. But what do we do to change the narrative and change the mindset across the board so that people who are coming, searching for new beginnings, I don't want to say entitlement, but feel that they can have the same rights and the same strength of voice as anybody else does? So how do we create that environment? But then please step on my toes and step on yours all day, every day.
Yeah, I think that the vulnerable space of having more vulnerability would allow for more people to be themselves, to ask for help. And that actually isn't just for immigrants, it's for everyone. But those that were born, raised in this culture are more equipped with these things, so they don't also advocate for it because they may not need it or understand how much others might need it. But it is a thing about our culture where spaces are often not vulnerable enough for making even simple mistakes to allow for a healthy learning environment. And as we evolve in our communities, and starting with communities like Hatch, where people can go out into the world and be leaders in this way, where they're vulnerable and they're showing how to be more gentle in this exchange in our workplaces and our schools, is so healthy. And I would give advice to my parents and to their parents, being more gentle on ourselves, to take that risk, to be vulnerable, even if the other isn't, because it has to start somewhere. And they've already taken that big risk to be here. And so there's that risk that we take for ourselves, right? And I think being vulnerable is that risk.
There are communities in the United States that have seen, or in the world, who have seen people migrate. Big groups of countries will move into a new space with maybe a small population, and there happens to be this kind of missteps happening, could be seen as like provocations or anything like that. And so I'm curious about just leaning into culture shock a little bit more that both communities might be experiencing.
I heard someone say this at Hatch, but they said something about some people being hard on the outside and soft on the inside, and then Americans coming off as soft on the outside but hard on the inside. Or
I
more.
remember that.
Yeah, that really stuck with me. And I think I've heard outside of the United States people echo that a lot about Americans. So just naming right there, that's a kind of a culture difference, or at least in perception, that feels shocking to people, is that when you come to the United States, people are super polite. It's a little harder to actually get to know them. It's a little harder to actually get them to be vulnerable. I know one thing I experience a lot just having been in Bulgaria is you could be in a grocery store and the clerk is telling you advice about how to live and is, again, unsolicited, just saying, you need to do this and you're wrong about this, and just telling you what to do. That's so much more normal. And I think there is perceived as a sign of caring. Like you express your care by being invested in other people's business. And this idea that your business is my business is offensive. So coming here and people putting up boundaries can feel really alienating if not expressed appropriately.
Yeah, being willing to jump in and just guide someone really objectively is helpful, and might be what somebody needs in that moment is just clear direction because they are learning.
Yes.
Because we in America do hold back with this idea that they shouldn't meddle in business of others to let them figure it out is actually very, in a lot of ways, harmful, because that person might really be struggling with a simple task and just needs direction.
My dad often says, if he messes up a word, he really would prefer someone just tell him and just say, you're saying that wrong. But I think people would be mortified at doing that.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's hard getting and receiving feedback or giving feedback. Yeah. Because I feel that my neck hairs if I have to give feedback, my neck hairs are going to go off, and my body's going to tell me that it's going to be uncomfortable because I don't know how they're going to react.
So if we're creating, again, like a sensibility for cultural assimilation, that's one of the things is, okay, we're going to step on each other's toes. And how did you just say it? Like, we will we're going to have to give each other some direct feedback. That's kind of a ground rule here.
It also depends if culturally that level of directness is
So here's how we're going to navigate it, or here's how you
Yeah.
navigate it with a culture like this or like that.
Way more, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there's a lot of assumptions that everyone knows the system everywhere. And more often than not is probably the opposite.
I will also say for most of my life until I moved to New York 10 years ago, I was probably not someone that gave as much direct feedback. So I think because culturally, we're a culture of very polite people. That doesn't mean we don't think things. So I'll just say that it took me a very long time. It took me having to live in New York and get some really direct feedback to learn how to do it myself.
Yeah.
So I think it's just a matter of, in terms of culture shocks, I'm already thinking ahead of what is the solution for it, which is like, how do you create educational opportunities for cross-cultural competencies and knowledge? But I don't want to jump ahead too much. I wanted to contribute and say there was two things, I think, for my family and many folks that I've known that migrated to the United States around the same time that I did. One was that most people that migrate out of necessity, like my family did, to you, what you know about America is, yes, it's amazing. It's this land of opportunity. But what you know about it is what in Hollywood through movies. The culture shock is when you get here, because the movies is very inspirational always. And like all you realize that, okay, it's a little different. Yes, it's great. It's a land of opportunity, but I have to work 80 hours a week in order to support. So like what the movies, this is very basic, but what the movies displayed were stories of like maybe 1 out of a million people that landed in the United States and had this incredible experience. And so I think the culture shock was like, oh, we're not all destined for like you really, because and oftentimes when people are coming as immigrants and they have family back home, your level of responsibility isn't only about helping to settle the people you came with, but it's helping to financially support the people you left behind. So you have like double duties.
Sometimes people aren't able to migrate somewhere. Some people call them refugees. You're talking about displaced people. Take me through the experience of someone who doesn't make it to a different country.
Internally, displacement is also a form of displacement too, right? Depending on which region of the world, if there's a community or a city or a geographic region of a country where you grew up, and that's what sometimes you are having to move because of violence or whatever it might be. We work in Central America and we've observed a lot of internally displaced folks within there as well as others.
In the moment of crisis when people flee, forcibly displaced, whether it's internal or they reach another country, the experience can often be that they will arrive in a refugee settlement or a camp. But they also might be just an urban refugee as well, and that is also widely spread globally. And in the context of a refugee camp or a settlement, those numbers are traceable, and we can speak to those through under the United Nations, where we work at Alight. We work under the mandate of UNHCR, United Nations High Commissioners for Refugees. And we've been doing that work for 45 years. So I'll just speak to what that's like from my angle as a humanitarian working in that space for 11 years. The reality is that when they arrive in a refugee camp, they will likely live there for 10 to 20 years. And many children will be born there and will only know that community. And also that you are among only people who have faced the same plight. And so the perspective of your community is very narrow. You are hosted by a national community, but oftentimes it's far-reaching to get to that community as well. A lot of times these camps, refugee camps and settlements are very far out of reach. They're in locations that are hard to reach. So that means resources, but also other people that are there to maybe support or become new community. So yeah, the reality is that INGO workers and the UN and all the support systems that come in often become part of their community as well, because they're reaching out to gain new connection and perspective, and just they're living their lives. They're living their lives inside, still pursuing their dreams that they still hold. And so Alight is on that journey of meeting people where they're at to help them rebuild, support, walk with them to rebuild the lives of meaning and purpose that they are pursuing, even if it's in a refugee camp.
I think there's also another lens to that too that I'll lift. And I think for those that wish to leave their home countries for whatever reason and just don't have the means to do it, if and when there's foreign intervention, what it also creates is aid dependency in many ways. And essentially, if aid dependency exists for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, and children are being born into this environment where all they know is that their mother or father has to line up waiting for this truck to come and distribute food supplies. That's all they're going to see. And so I think I have also seen, having been from Afghanistan, this is common sometimes that my family members will make, is like the Afghanistan that they left behind 30, 40 years is very different today because the profile of the people are the ones that are still waiting and very dependent on foreign intervention, specifically the United States, who has been there for many years, to still be there and solve their problems. So you're essentially like dismantling the level of empowerment that the community has. So I think there's also this like downside of, as much as everybody wants to be helpful, and I don't know the answer to that, but it's really tough. Someone else is always coming in and dropping.
So you're talking about international aid versus sustainability.
Yeah. Sometimes I don't even know if going into it, international aid expects themselves to be there for as long as they are. So maybe they're thinking they're there for a moment in time to help. And then I think what we have seen time and time again across the globe is that there are certain pockets of the world where it's essentially like, Angela, you phrased it nicely earlier, that even the aid communities are seen as part of the community themselves because you're just expected to be there.
Yeah, the system was set up for short term, but in reality, it's long term. And so it's this really awkward life building pursuit with short term resource with a long term reality. And it is creating dependency in that way because they don't have anywhere to go unless they go back home. In many cases, that's just not safe. And so there is that need for a municipality, a service that comes in to provide those basic needs.
What about the sovereignty and decision making? When is there overreach in humanitarian aid?
I think the cycle of emergency response, can really create a bubble of abundance, I'll say, of resources in the best of intentions. And people receive with graciousness, and it's allowing them to survive a really critical moment in their life. The downside to that is, where does it come again? And that is a tricky balance. We have many examples in the world to point to where it completely took out economy. Haiti is always a classic example where the aid industry really came in with the best of intentions, and it took out operating businesses that could have been or just couldn't survive under the free products and water and the services being offered in abundance. So I think that it's a tricky balance of understanding how massive a response is needed across the country. Can that response be handled regionally first, right? There needs to be almost like an assessment of first ring, second ring, third ring kind of response efforts that are really allowing the people affected by that crisis to lead, to be part of that decision-making tree, and understanding where best resources could be pulled that would actually elevate their own economy, that would elevate their own neighbors, their own partners, right? And so when you say overreach, I think in a response effort, so much of that collaboration assessment isn't done with the people because there's no time, but that's causing a lot of unfortunate when you look back, like, oh, you wish that you would have been able to work with the people more directly to make those choices.
Yeah. I give a lot of props to Morocco for saying, hey, we want to make our own decisions. it gives them an opportunity. I would say, yes, Morocco, do that and ask for the money and go to trusted sources within your country that have the analytics, that have the networks, that can deploy that can convert those financial resources into tangible resources that can help support what's happening in terms of the natural disaster. Or embrace international NGOs or NGOs that have local voices and local leadership involved in a lot of their decision making. And I think that just comes back to, I'm all for like sovereign decision making around that. I also think there's like benefits of working sometimes with international aid or humanitarian organizations, and that there's best practices they're bringing in because they've done it in so many different regions of the world. But what's really important is having not only the ability to respond in that moment for the immediate needs, but also thinking long term. And as you're thinking long term, making sure that those solutions are co-created. And for those organizations not to go in assuming that the same problems that Morocco would have as a result of this natural disaster would be the same as what they experienced 5 years ago or 5 minutes ago somewhere else. It's like, let's really define what the problem is once you have a chance to catch your breath, and what are the solutions, versus coming in with a little bit of a colonial toolkit. No, this is what we think you need, and then leaving.
What are some areas that in the whole process of migration, and I understand there's probably a lot, but what are some of the areas that you can see that need innovation?
Definitely economic livelihoods, investment in innovation for start. There's not as much investment in innovation in general, and I would say that impact funding and all that is really needed to take a hard look at all the systems. There's so many systems and that need a hard look, but yeah, just starting with that initial innovation funding needs to be more.
So it's deep entrenched into an old system.
Yeah.
And it doesn't, because it's so tied down by other humanitarian aid, it doesn't have maybe the budget to give it that internal look to study itself as an operating system.
Yeah.
Yeah. Innovation funding is very slim. Yeah. It's a hard race hard to get those funds because they don't have the return that other innovation vehicles have. But the return is lives saved and lives improved. And while maybe that can be argued as the most important bottom line, it's not driving the innovation dollars that other industries are. And it's a massive industry, actually, that really needs to be improved at a large scale.
Yeah, I would say it definitely needs to be reimagined. And I think one of the things that a lot of humanitarian organizations take a lot of pride in, again, humanitarian, centered on the human, the industry has always operated from a place of altruism. How do we give? So you'll see a lot of humanitarian organizations speaking very proudly about the fact that 87 to 92% of their revenue goes directly towards their programs, which is great. But it's also worrisome for me to say, why do NGOs feel proud that they only have 8 to 10% to actually focus on themselves, to change the way that they work in order to create more efficiencies, to better understand the problems, et cetera? So I would say there's probably a few things. Like one is really understanding the problem, to build on what you were saying earlier, Lucy. Is I went through some exercise recently. It's like, oh, what's the problem you're trying to solve? Why? Okay. And then what is the problem you're trying to solve there? Why? What is the root cause that we're trying to solve for? What are the interventions it's going to take to get there? So I think it's both an art and a science of understanding what you're trying to solve for. And it doesn't happen when you only have 8% of your entire funding vehicle available to get to the root and then to pivot and create innovative solutions. Mm-hmm. I don't think anything is going to change in the humanitarian sector until we make space for the nonprofits that are in that space to also focus on like building their toolkit a little bit more and refining it.
Yeah, an iterative process needs to be invested in. Yeah. Just like any other innovation.
What's coming up for me is just that more from the perspective of there are technical challenges and solutions that need to be applied to immigration and this whole topic, and there are adaptive ones. So the adaptive ones are the human aspects, the places where a lot of different stakeholders are going to have to come together and change their hearts and some of their values and maybe give something up and not have a solution in sight, but just be working towards progress. And what's coming up for me is just who do we need to work with to get them comfortable in that space and get them to see that there are the technical things and the adaptive things, and there are skills you can build in yourself and in the communities we're trying to empower to be hosts. There are skills that need to be built up so that they can navigate these adaptive challenges more effectively.
Yeah.
Yeah. That also lends to peace building, right? When everyone actually rises up and gets better together, they're better for having each other in their community. Those tools sound like they would be really elevating for hosts and new arrivals in a country to learn together and grow together.
And it really is together. I think one thing I'm sensitive to, we were talking about this earlier, is like who has the burden of change? And I think it has to be both newcomers and people who have been here for a while. No population is privileged in this sense. The values and culture and history and norms of both matter a lot. So it's about figuring out how we work together, not just how one can adapt to the other.
Do you think there should be borders?
On paper. Not meaning on paper. There should be borders on paper if you're writing something, so you don't write outside.
Margins.
Margins. Sorry, English is not my first language.
Yeah.
I love pluralism. Like one thing I've been thinking about a lot, I just became a citizen last year of the United States, and I've been thinking a lot about what that means and how a country as large as the United States can survive. And I am a big proponent of pluralism and people being able to do their own thing. And so something that scares me about no borders and denying differences is like us all trying to move towards one way of operating, one way of thinking. I think that's like anti-human to me. And yeah, borders are arbitrary.
I think even with borders, people are going to do what their human nature is, which is to somehow find a way. And so my answer would be no, but it's more of a acknowledgement that human beings are meant to travel, meant to meet each other, meant to live where their hearts desire. And there should be a more reformed model that is flexible and fluid in the way of the way that humans flow, the way that humans migrate, the way that they travel, the way that they yearn and grow. That's a system should be able to grow with the humans that it supports and protects.
I think there's an opportunity to redefine borders, because I think oftentimes they're seen as divisions and as things that keep other people out versus the crossing of a threshold into a new experience and into a new culture. In my mind, I imagine a borderless world where we see the people across this threshold as an extension of our own family, because in many ways, in many countries, the only thing that's creating that division is this like physical border you find on a map, or in some cases there's fences, in some cases there's a line. So in my mind, we have a borderless world. It's just that the word borders itself is a lot more divisive. What I'm saying is there's an opportunity to shift the narrative. I think a lot of what we're dealing with today, and you're seeing like so many different sectors redefining language, where there's like the criminal justice system in America and what language they use to categorize folks that have been incarcerated in the past or whatever it might be, to the humanitarian space. There's just a language shift. But if you manage to find a borderless planet, take me with you.
I will.
Yeah. Oh, you look deep in that.
Yeah, I am. There's just such competing values. I don't know the answer.
Yeah.
It's projected in the next 50 years through climate change that there'll be 200 million climate refugees. Considering the last question, what do you think of that?
That we're all going to wish for a borderless society pretty darn soon.
I'm not surprised that, just considering the growing trends in the average of climate displaced individuals over the last couple of years, I think there's not only an opportunity to think about climate mitigation and adaptation more broadly, but to also, and this is for like funders and researchers out there, to think about how do you leverage the communities right now that are most affected by climate and creating displacement as, for lack of better phrasing, as a sandbox for figuring out what solutions there might be. Because it's escalating. We all know that, as you just shared. But it's like, how do we not just create ways to sustain people's livelihood in this moment, but are there things that we can do in those physical geographies to turn things around? Or what is the broader, bigger solution? Hence, going back to what we talked about earlier about innovation and lack of funding in the humanitarian space. Like, now is the time to invest.
It's already being projected. The reality is that we need to get ready now. We need to start planning systems that are prepared for the migration that will happen from here to there, wherever that might be. And I have heard even in the U.S., and there's plenty of research happening now, that many in the South will be moving to the North. It's being projected. And so how are our systems leveling up and getting ready for that? But that is, what can we learn from the migrations that have been happening? Forcibly displacement's been happening for decades and decades. And how are we learning from that to improve systems? This is an innovation. There's so many insights that are out there, and how are we putting it all together and really coming together to solve for new systems that can carry the weight of the migration that's being projected by this climate crisis.
Seems like there are policies and systems set up that will create needless burden, needless hassle as these changes happen more and more. So while that needs attention, of course, so does, again, the human element of it, because you can create all these new systems. And once this shift starts to happen, how are people going to get along? How are people going to honor and see each other? How will they cope with the change that's happening? So it has to be both like systems and policy and individual hearts and minds.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's beautiful.
Co-creative solution building right now, today, would serve for a better tomorrow and 50 years in this way, that everybody was working toward a healthier planet, healthier communities, knowing that they will be disrupted.
Who's resisting you?
What's concerning me right now is just thinking this is one huge problem that's going to require an overhaul of systems and overhaul of all these patterns and norms. And there are other challenges that are requiring that same work. And so I'm like, when there are so many fires or when there are so many things, like, how do we prioritize? That's overwhelming.
Yeah, I think funding is also competing. These are competing priorities in the social impact space, for sure. Climate dollars versus systems that need attention right now. And it does feel overwhelming. But there is the human need for climate displacement today also. And those response efforts are largely going untalked about or undiagnosed in many ways as climate migration, but they are emergency responses that are happening. And there are data points that will be helping us later when everyone is feeling more of the burden of that.
I would say the biggest resistance really is funding in order to enable and unlock all these things that you just talked about. So there just needs to be bigger investment in this space for us to innovate and figure out what these other solutions are, whether it's capacity building, whether it's like heart connections, whether it's like actual physical, tangible, hard skill solutions that are happening in response to displacement. There just is. Otherwise, we've survived, and I'm sure the human race will continue to survive, and the humanitarian space will continue to do good work. I guess it's just more a question of, do we want to do good work, or do we want to do transformative work? And it can't happen when we still only have 8 to 10% of our revenue lines that are just supporting internal infrastructure with limited innovation.
Why is it so hard to get funding?
Because most funders think the money that they're giving should go directly to the quotation mark beneficiaries. We call them customers. They're not wrong. So then, but then that limits. So you have a very limited amount of money left from a grant that you might get.
So then
to support your own infrastructure.
Yeah. So then changing their hearts and minds is now the work. It's like funding is the problem, but to solve that problem, it's like more and more hearts and minds that somehow, I don't know. It's
and the thing is, it's probably that a lot of the funders that humanitarian NGOs work with think that way, but there's such a sense of urgency to like respond to these massive needs that nobody's slowing down, or the powers that be are not empowering the people who are signing off on the grants to say, no, we actually want you to think outside the box. There's just this like, is there a way we can freeze time and say, okay, no disasters, nobody's getting displaced, everybody's just going to hang out for 6 months, and we're going to figure out what this model looks like? So I think everybody's well-intentioned, but it's just kind of slow down. How do we just take a little bit of a step back and reinvent?
Yeah, that innovation space again, it's missing in this space in a big way. Just being allowed to iterate and learn from one thing to the next.
Because the sector is about survival, Angela. It's not about innovation. It's always been about survival. I'm speaking from my own experience. I don't know about your family's experience. All my family, and so it's not just the people who are getting displaced that's thinking about survival. The organizations and the funders are also thinking about survival versus innovation.
Yeah.
So how do you make space? Yeah.
The system is set up for that short-term survival. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm just curious now, what brings you hope?
The climate crisis is such a big topic with such extreme sides to how to solve it, from the mitigation efforts of the actual planet protection to the human side of it, right? So there's these, and those are immediate. So it's like, where to invest that money? So even if there was money, it's like, how do we decide the priorities of where it goes and what's the most urgent? But there are urgencies on both sides. And I think there's also, like any other system that gets created, like the humanitarian space that got created for immediate needs only, without that long-term thinking. So that there really has to be this co-created, shared space where both sides are supported, invested in, and that there is that know-how on the ground of people who've lived through the disasters, who've lived through these crises, who know of the land, who know the planet in these places, right? Are we even bringing in all of our dots right now in the climate space to have those conversations? It just seems like such a massive problem that even with the money, where do you start? That's how I feel. That overwhelmed feeling that you're feeling, Lucy, I feel that too.
I think what gives me hope are two things. One of them is that there are a lot of good people in this world that are really invested in finding solutions for and with the displaced. And if in my lifetime I were to come across a group similar in size and similar in spirit as the ones that I've met here this week at Hatch, then I would be very happy. And that gives me a lot of hope that there are at least people that are intently listening. And if they themselves are not involved in the work, they can help connect you to others who might. So that gives me hope. And finally, I think that this next generation that comes after all of us, like my nieces and nephews and all of them who are amazing, I think they have the world at their fingertips through technology.
I do want to speak to the hopefulness of finding, I do think Hatch has this container that's also found a lot of amazing people who are thinking about these solutions in big ways, but also continue to find. And so I do have that confidence that there's a ecosystem already in process for the future that's got the muscle and the know-how and all the right ability to address this. And so that does give me a lot of hope too. Yeah.
I don't know how much hope I have. I feel like I think if good AI doesn't do it for us and good people don't do it for us, what's on my mind is just that I'm glad we were here and we were awake and we saw the planet. And I think hopefully our appreciation for that will push us, our appreciation for our own experience here and looking at other people and wanting them to have an experience here will just push us to survive and fight for each other.
I'm Tate Chamberlin. This is the Hatch Podcast. We are dispatching from Heartland. Lucy, Zohra, Angela, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, Tate.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So that's our show. 3 voices, 3 stories, 3 ways of making sense of human migration and displacement. If there's a thread running through it all, maybe it's this. Moving isn't just geography. It's emotional terrain. It's culture shock. It's learning to be a beginner again. And yet, even in that uncertainty, there's something steady. People reaching out. A neighbor correcting your pronunciation. A teacher explaining a tradition. A stranger saying, "You belong here." Those small gestures that turn a place into community. We live in a world that's constantly shifting. Borders, identities, families in motion. And while governments debate policies and aid packages, actual human beings are carrying out their dreams across oceans, deserts, and city streets. If you're listening right now, and you've moved, or your family has, or you're trying to help someone who has, remember this. Belonging isn't a finish line. It's a practice. It's forgiveness, patience, and the courage to learn. I'm Tate Chamberlin. This is Dispatch from the Heartland. Until next time, keep making space, keep listening, and keep imagining a world where no one feels alone. Music for Dispatch from the Heartland is by Gangsta Grass, an electrifying blend of bluegrass and hip-hop that captures the spirit of the Heartland. Stay tuned. Later in this series, we'll delve deeper into Gangsta Grass's story and their unique sound in our full episode. Don't miss it.
Son, rebel no pauses, taking out your forces with a switchblade and a rusty gun. Doing this forever, you've just begun. Don't start none, it won't be none.
It seems now more than ever that we have found ourselves on the cusp of monumental worldwide change. Whether we consider the environment, politics, infrastructure, health, economics, or inequities across a broad swath of social constructs, the consensus is clear and urgent. All is not as it should be. The United Nations, a consortium of 193 member states from around the globe, agrees. In 2015, the UN unanimously adopted the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. These goals call for urgent action in global partnership to secure peace and prosperity for people and the planet, now and into the future.
In alignment with the SDGs, Hatch, a curated network of artists, activists, and entrepreneurs working together to accelerate positive global change, has partnered with I Am Interchange to fuse adventure journalism with experiential design labs to develop innovative solutions to complex global challenges. Hey everybody, thanks for listening to the podcast. If you enjoy it, please subscribe or leave us a rating. This episode was produced by Yara Craner, Susan Karstensen, and me, Tate Chamberlin. A shout out to our media and production team, Jessica Byerly, Darko Sevilla, Jacob Desch, Sean Mackinson, Amin Yarsu, and Zane Giordano. With so much gratitude to the Hatch supporters, Steelcase, the Kauffman Foundation, the Gwydion Fund, Envision Equality, the Hatch Volunteers, Board of Directors, Hatch Guardians, and the community who help make this work and mission possible. To learn more about Hatch, visit hatchexperience.org. Building community could not happen without food. And with that, I'd like to thank Whistle Pig Korean, Red Tractor Pizza, and Zocalo Coffee House. Do you have an issue that's riddled by gridlock in your community? Shoot me an email. Remember, share airtime and don't ruin dinner.